The ballroom went quiet, the kind of silence that hurts the ears. Crystal glasses froze mid-air, and elegant faces twisted with amusement as my daughter's voice thundered across the hall. "Look at her," she laughed, pointing straight at me. "She still thinks she belongs here in that thrift store dress." Laughter followed, loud, sharp, merciless. 200 guests, the city's wealthiest and most respected, joined in as if it were part of the wedding entertainment. I stood at the edge of the dance floor, clutching a small gift wrapped in bright paper that suddenly felt childish in my trembling hands. The red ribbon slipped from my fingers. My cheeks burned, my vision blurred. My daughter, my only child, was mocking me at her own wedding. I wanted to disappear. For years, I had accepted being invisible. A quiet woman with rough hands, plain clothes, and a modest job no one respected. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, I had come only to bless her marriage, to smile and pretend that all the years of distance between us didn't matter. Instead, I was standing under a chandelier that shimmered like accusation, while whispers filled the room. And then, something strange happened. Among the laughter, one man's voice never joined in. He wasn't smiling anymore. His name was Mr. Cole Harrington, my daughter's new father-in-law, a man of power, precision, and pride. The owner of a corporation that half this crowd either worked for or depended on. He froze, the color draining from his face as his eyes locked onto mine. His hand, holding a glass of champagne, stopped mid-air. "Wait," he said under his breath, just loud enough for those near him to hear. The word cut through the laughter. Heads turned toward him, then back to me. He took a hesitant step forward. I know you," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. A murmur rippled across the guests. My daughter's painted smile faltered. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked, trying to laugh it off, but the tension in her voice betrayed her. I felt my heart begin to pound, but not from fear. From recognition. Because in that single second, I saw the truth unfold behind Mr. Harrington's eyes. The memories he was trying to place, the familiar name echoing in his mind, the business meeting where he had seen my face before. For 20 years, I had lived a double life. To my daughter, I was the poor, tired woman who mopped floors. To the world of high finance, I was someone else entirely. But I had hidden that identity so deeply, so carefully, that even my own child never suspected. And now, standing in a room filled with laughter and judgment, I realized the secret was no longer safe. The orchestra's music faded into nothing. My daughter blinked, confused, as Mr. Harrington slowly lowered his glass and stared at me with the unease of a man recognizing a ghost. The guests whispered in confusion. I met his eyes and smiled, just slightly, because I knew what he was remembering. He had seen my face before. Not at charity events. Not in tabloids. But across a conference table, signing papers worth millions. That night, under a rain of golden lights and shallow laughter, the truth began to crack through the surface of every lie that had been told about me. And for the first time in decades, I stood tall, calm, and unafraid. Because when the truth came out, and it would, no one in that glittering room would ever dare laugh at me again. And my name is Evelyn Hart, and for the last 25 years, I have lived like a shadow. To the world, I was a cleaner. The woman who arrived when offices were empty, who smelled of soap and exhaustion, who left before the sun could remind her that another day had begun. People didn't look at me. They looked through me. I was the type of person they thanked without remembering my face, the kind of presence that existed only to make their world shine while mine remained dull. It wasn't always like this. Once I was a wife, a mother, and a dreamer. But when my husband died in a construction accident, I was left with nothing except a 12-year-old daughter and a pile of medical bills. Jasmine, my beautiful, brilliant girl, used to hold my hand and say, "It's okay, Mom. We'll be okay." But as the years passed, her words changed. So did her eyes. When she entered high school, she began to hide her background. She'd walk 10 steps ahead of me in public, pretending not to know me when her classmates passed by. She hated the smell of detergent on my clothes, the stains on my hands, the old shoes I wore until the soles were paper-thin. And I, foolishly, tried harder, working double shifts, taking buses through freezing nights, buying her used books so she could dream beyond our poverty. But dreams built on shame rarely last. Every night, after scrubbing floors and wiping glass doors, I would sit alone in the janitor's closet with a small notebook. I wrote numbers, lists of costs, debts, and wages. But one night, something strange happened. I overheard two executives discussing stock options. Their conversation meant nothing to them, but it became everything to me. They spoke carelessly about markets, mergers, and a company about to rise in value. I wrote every word. That was the night I started listening. While they worked, I absorbed their world, the patterns of business, the logic behind success, the secrets of people who believed no one beneath them could understand. I began reading newspapers from recycling bins, picking up abandoned finance magazines, and taking online lessons from library computers after my shifts. Slowly, piece by piece, I built a kind of knowledge that couldn't be bought, the kind earned by desperation and sleepless nights. My first investment was $50, a risk that felt like madness. I bought a few shares in a company I'd overheard them discussing. Months later, it tripled in value. That single event lit something inside me. For years, I repeated the pattern, saving coins, studying charts, learning strategies. My old notebooks filled with calculations instead of cleaning schedules. By the time Jasmine left for college, she was already ashamed of me. I never told her about my growing savings, the quiet empire I was building from scraps of information. She thought I was a tired woman pushing a mop, and I let her believe that. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that beneath the scent of bleach and dust, I carried something far more powerful, knowledge. And knowledge, once planted, grows in silence. Years passed. My investments multiplied. I bought properties, small businesses, even shares in companies whose office floors I used to clean. Every decision was careful, precise, hidden behind layers of ordinary life. I wore the same old coat, lived in the same small apartment, and took the same late-night buses. But behind closed doors, I was slowly shaping a financial empire. Still, through every success, one truth remained bitter. The farther I rose, the more ashamed my daughter became. And now, standing at her wedding among people who measured worth by fabric and fortune, I realized she had no idea who her mother truly was. But soon she would. And when that moment came, the woman she had mocked as invisible would become unforgettable. People think success is born in offices, in polished boardrooms under golden lights. But mine began in silence, in empty hallways that smelled of bleach, where I pushed a mop while listening to men discuss millions. It's funny, really. They never looked at me long enough to realize I understood every word. Every deal they whispered, every number they threw around, every strategy they revealed while believing no one was listening. I memorized all of it. I didn't have a business degree or rich parents. I had curiosity, hunger, and endless nights to think. I started small. $50. Then $100. I invested in companies that no one else believed in, businesses people mocked over lunch while I cleaned their offices. And while they laughed, my savings began to grow quietly, like a tree sprouting in darkness. But knowledge was my true wealth. I learned when to risk and when to wait. I studied how the market moved like emotion, sometimes greedy, sometimes scared. I read discarded financial newspapers like sacred texts, circling numbers until they made sense. My coworkers thought I was crazy, a janitor studying Wall Street. But I wasn't chasing luxury. I was building freedom. For 2 decades, I kept my world small. Same apartment. Same job. Same bus route. Every dollar I earned had a purpose. When I finally made my first 6 figures, I didn't buy jewelry or cars. I bought silence, anonymity. My investments expanded. Real estate, startups, quiet partnerships, all under names that weren't mine. Shell companies, trust accounts, foundations hidden behind initials and codes. The woman they thought was invisible had become a shadow with power. But the truth about building an empire in secret is this: it's lonely. You can't celebrate victories when no one knows you've won. You can't confide in family when you're afraid they'll see you differently. My daughter still called me poor, and I let her. She married into wealth, always chasing the world I quietly owned behind curtains. Then came the day I signed the contract that changed everything. Harrington and Company Holdings, one of the oldest corporations in the state, was drowning. Lawsuits, debt, scandal. Investors were fleeing. My advisors told me to stay away, that it was a sinking ship. But I saw something no one else did. I saw a company that could rise again under the right leadership. So I made an offer, through one of my private corporations, to purchase it in full. $45 million. Cash. Clean. Confidential. 2 weeks later, the deal closed. The papers were signed. The company's board never knew that the mysterious buyer, listed as EH Ventures, stood for Evelyn Hart. And now, standing in that glittering ballroom, I watched as Mr. Cole Harrington, the former owner of the company I had just bought, stared at me with disbelief. His son had just married my daughter. The man who once ruled empires now answered to me, and he didn't even know it until this moment. The memory of that signature, the sound of my pen on the contract, echoed in my head like music. Every humiliation, every insult, every lonely night had led to this. The guests still whispered, confused by Mr. Harrington's sudden change in tone. My daughter smiled awkwardly, unaware that the man she now called Dad was looking at her mother as if he'd seen a ghost. He took a step forward, lowering his voice. "You're Evelyn Hart, aren't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The look in his eyes told me he already knew the truth. And for the first time in my life, silence belonged to me. The chandelier above us glittered like 1,000 watching eyes, reflecting every heartbeat in the room. The laughter that had filled the air moments earlier faded into uneasy silence. I could feel hundreds of stares pressing against my back. My daughter, Jasmine, still stood near the stage, her smile stiff, her perfect posture faltering. Mr. Cole Harrington had turned pale. The man who once dictated boardrooms with his voice now looked like a statue carved from disbelief. He took 2 careful steps toward me, each one echoing louder than the music that had stopped mid-note. "You," he said quietly, his voice trembling, "you're Evelyn Hart." Every whisper in the ballroom stopped breathing. The guests leaned closer, trying to understand what was unfolding before them. My daughter blinked in confusion. "Mr. Harrington," she began nervously, "that's just my mother. You know, the one I told you about who cleans offices." She gave a hollow laugh, desperate to erase the tension. But Mr. Harrington didn't move his eyes from me. His expression shifted, shock, then respect, then something that almost looked like fear. "You're the EH who purchased my company," he whispered, his voice breaking the fragile quiet like glass underfoot. The sound of his words spread across the room faster than music ever could. Faces turned. Murmurs erupted. "Purchased. Company." Someone gasped. Another whispered my name like a secret. Jasmine's fake smile collapsed entirely. She looked at her father-in-law, then at me. "What is he talking about?" she demanded, her voice sharp with panic. I didn't answer. I stood still, my small gift still in my hands, its ribbon now crumpled and torn. For years I had stayed silent. Tonight, I let the silence speak for me. Mr. Harrington reached into his pocket with trembling hands and pulled out his phone. "I knew it," he muttered, scrolling quickly through his email. "The signatures, the video conference, that voice." He looked up at me again, eyes wide with realization. It's you. You're the mysterious buyer. Gasps rippled through the guests like wind through tall grass. Even the band stopped pretending to play. Jasmine took a few steps forward, her heels clicking on the marble floor, each one heavier than the last. "Mom," she said softly, "tell him he's mistaken. Tell him you're not, whatever this is." But I didn't say a word. The silence grew unbearable. The crowd began to shift, some curious, some guilty, some suddenly polite. The same people who had laughed at my cheap dress moments earlier now stared as if they had discovered gold hidden beneath dust. Mr. Harrington lowered his phone, his voice solemn now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, turning to the crowd, "this woman standing before you, this woman you all laughed at, is Evelyn Hart, the businesswoman who just saved Harrington and Company Holdings from collapse. Without her, 600 families would have lost their income this very month." The sound of his words fell like thunder. I saw expressions change, embarrassment replacing arrogance, silence swallowing pride. Jasmine's mouth opened, but no words came. The color drained from her face, leaving behind only disbelief. She turned to me, trembling. "Mom, is that true?" I finally looked at her, my voice calm and even. "Why does it matter now?" The room froze. For 20 years I had watched these kinds of people measure worth in brands and money. Now they measured it in regret. I had no need to boast, no desire to humiliate. Their own guilt was punishment enough. Mr. Harrington took a respectful step back, lowering his head slightly, an unspoken apology from a man who had just realized who held his fate. I lifted my chin and straightened my shoulders, the same way I used to before walking into midnight offices with a mop in hand. Only this time, I wasn't invisible. And as I stood there beneath the chandelier's cold light, I realized something profound. The same people who had laughed at my poverty were now trembling before my power. But this wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was only the beginning of the reckoning they all deserved. The night after the wedding felt longer than any I'd lived before. The ballroom's laughter still echoed in my ears, every cruel word, every mocking glance. But what haunted me most wasn't the humiliation. It was the look on Jasmine's face when truth cracked her perfect illusion. A daughter's pride shattering into fear. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mom, it's me," she said softly. Her voice, once sharp as glass, now trembled. "Can I come over? We need to talk." It had been years since she'd asked to visit me, not since she decided her friends didn't need to know where her mother lived. I said nothing for a long moment before replying, "Of course, Jasmine." When she arrived, she looked entirely out of place in my small apartment. Her white coat brushed against my worn sofa, her diamond ring glinting under the flickering bulb. She stared around the room as if seeing it for the first time. "Mom," she began, forcing a nervous laugh, "about last night, Mr. Harrington must have made a mistake, right? You're not really that woman he said you are, right?" I poured her tea. "Why do you think it was a mistake?" I asked quietly. "Because you're you," she said quickly. "You clean offices. You take the bus. You wear that." Her voice cracked on the last word, her eyes darting between my worn dress and the porcelain cup shaking in her hand. I smiled faintly. "And if he wasn't mistaken?" She froze. The silence stretched like a wire ready to snap. "Then," she whispered, "then everything I thought I knew about you, about us, would be a lie." I didn't respond. Some truths don't need defending. Over the next few days, her messages multiplied. Sweet at first. "Mom, are you okay? I miss you." Then, sharper. "Did you really buy his company? Why would you hide something like that from me?" By the end of the week, her tone changed completely. "If you really have money, Mom, I think I deserve to know. I'm your daughter." That last line stung more than I expected. Deserve. as if love had become currency. Then came the knock at my door one rainy evening. Jasmine stood there again, her hair pulled back, her voice impatient. "I just need the truth," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Are you that Evelyn Hart? Did you really buy Harrington and Company? Are you a millionaire or not?" I took my time answering. I set down my teacup, met her eyes, and said, "Do you really think a woman like me could be?" Her eyes narrowed. "I think you're lying." Her arrogance had returned, but underneath it was fear. I could see it in the way her fingers twitched, in the way she couldn't hold my gaze for long. She wasn't here for love, she was here for answers that could save her lifestyle. That's when I noticed the small tremor in her voice. "Devin and we're having some problems," she admitted. "Financial ones. Dad's company hasn't recovered fully. There are debts. Maybe you could help us. Just for now." And there it was. The real reason for her visit. Not curiosity. Not guilt. Desperation. I leaned back in my chair, studying her the way I used to study markets, watching every flicker of emotion, every sign of weakness. "Jasmine," I said softly, "if I ever had that kind of money, would you want it, or would you want me?" Her lips parted, but no words came out, because deep down, she already knew the answer. That night, after she left, I opened a small box hidden in my drawer, documents, bank papers, proof of who I really was. My secret life, all sealed in silence. And as I looked at it, a thought formed that chilled me. Maybe it was time for Jasmine to learn what power truly looked like. Not the kind she married for. The kind her mother earned in silence. 3 days after our conversation, Jasmine returned with her husband, Devin. They looked different, not as polished as before, a little frayed around the edges. Money worries leave marks no makeup can hide. Devin held a folder under his arm. Jasmine held her ego barely together. "Mom," she started carefully, "we've been thinking about what you said. Maybe you really do know people who could help us." Her eyes glimmered with a mix of hope and calculation. I gestured for them to sit. The small room felt tighter than usual, as if the walls knew a truth was about to arrive. "Before we talk about money," I said softly, "let's talk about trust." Devin shifted uneasily while Jasmine leaned forward. "Of course we trust you, Mom." I smiled. "Do you? Or do you just need something from me?" She looked away. The truth was written in her silence. I stood and walked to my desk, pulling out a thin envelope I had prepared the night before. Inside was a contract I had drafted myself, part real, part lesson. I placed it on the table between us. "This," I said, "is a proposal. If you agree to the conditions, your debts will disappear. Completely." Jasmine's breathing quickened as she snatched the papers. Devin hesitated before reading over her shoulder. His brows knitted immediately. "Wait," he murmured. "These conditions, they're extreme." "Read them aloud," I said quietly. Jasmine's voice shook. Condition 1. Transfer all current assets as temporary collateral until repayment is complete. She looked up. "That means our house, our cars, everything would be in your name." "Only until you've proven responsibility," I answered. Devin's jaw tightened. "That's not help, that's control." Condition 2, Jasmine continued hurriedly, "move to a different city for 5 years and maintain limited contact with extended family." She blinked. "Why would we have to leave?" "Sometimes distance is the only way to see yourself clearly," I replied. Devin set the papers down. "Ms. Hart," he said formally, his voice measured, "this feels like a test." "It is," I said, "because money without change is a trap." Jasmine's hands trembled as she kept reading. Condition 3, waive any future inheritance rights. Her voice cracked. "You mean if we accept this money, we get nothing later?" Correct, I answered calmly. This would be your fresh start, no strings afterward. Devon stood. This isn't right. You're asking us to sacrifice our freedom for security. Jasmine grabbed his arm. Devon, please. We're drowning. 5 years isn't forever. Their voices clashed. Love versus fear, morality versus desperation. I watched quietly, the way I used to watch markets rise and fall. The pattern was always the same. People break not from pressure, but from greed. When the room finally fell silent, I spoke. Jasmine, if you sign that paper today, you'll have everything you think you want. But if you refuse, you might finally find who you really are. Her eyes filled with tears. I just want a chance to fix what I've done. I walked to the window, watching rain slide down the glass. 4 years, I had imagined this moment, the chance to hold power over the child who once mocked me. But seeing her there, broken and small, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Devon, I said without turning. Tell me honestly, what would you do if you were me? He hesitated, then spoke softly. I'd forgive her, but I wouldn't trust her yet. His answer hit me like a mirror, clear and painful. He was right. Trust wasn't a gift. It was earned. I turned back to them and placed another envelope on the table, the real one. This, I said, is the truth you've both been asking for. Jasmine looked up, confused. What truth? The one I've kept buried for 20 years, I said quietly. The truth about who I really am. And as their eyes met mine, fearful, hopeful, unsure, I knew the next words would rewrite everything they believed about me. The air in the room was thick with silence. Jasmine's trembling hands hovered over the envelope I had just placed on the table. Devon watched her closely, his jaw tense, his breath slow and deliberate. They both sensed this was no ordinary piece of paper. This was truth, waiting to be unwrapped. Open it, I said quietly. Jasmine tore it open, her fingers shaking so hard she nearly dropped the pages inside. As her eyes scanned the first line, color drained from her face. Devon leaned in, his expression tightening as he read the company logos printed on the documents. Legal contracts, bank statements, property deeds. The names were unmistakable. Harrington and Company. Holdings, EH Ventures, Hart Industries. Each one carried my signature. Jasmine looked up, her eyes wide. This can't be real, she whispered. It's very real, I replied. Everything you see there, the companies, the accounts, the investments, they're mine. Devon sat back slowly, disbelief etched across his face. You're the woman who bought my father's company, he murmured. Yes, I said softly. And I did it with the money I earned when the world thought I was worth nothing. Jasmine's voice broke. All these years, you let me believe you were poor. You watched me treat you like... She stopped herself, choking on shame. Like I was beneath you, I finished for her. Yes. And I stayed silent because I wanted you to learn what I had to learn. That respect can't be bought, and love means nothing when it's built on pride. Tears filled her eyes. I was cruel to you. I said things no daughter should ever say. Yes, you did, I said, my tone calm but firm. You humiliated me in front of strangers. But I don't want your apology. I want your understanding. Devon reached over, placing his hand gently over Jasmine's. She doesn't need your words, Jasmine, he said quietly. She needs your actions. For a long time, no one spoke. The sound of rain against the window filled the silence between us. Finally, Jasmine looked up. What do you want me to do? Start by facing what you've done, I said. Own it. Don't hide it. The same people who heard you insult me, they'll hear you apologize. Not for me, but for yourself. Her face twisted with pain, but she nodded. I'll do it. Weeks later, she did. In a hall full of guests who once laughed at my humiliation, my daughter stood tall and confessed every word she had said that night. She cried as she apologized, not for the cameras, not for reputation, but because, for the first time, she saw me. Not the cleaner. Not the poor widow. The woman. It was the moment I finally forgave her, not with words, but with a quiet smile that carried 20 years of love and hurt in one breath. Months passed. Jasmine and Devon rebuilt their lives modestly, working honestly, living simply. And one morning, she came to my office, not for money, but for guidance. "Mom," she said, smiling softly, "teach me how you built everything from nothing. I want to learn." That day, for the first time in decades, I didn't see shame in her eyes. I saw respect. I took her hand. "I'll teach you," I said, "but only if you promise one thing. Never hide your truth again. Because the greatest wealth isn't in what we earn, it's in who we become." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "I promise." And for the first time, I truly believed her. And now I want to ask you, if life ever gave you the chance to prove your worth to the people who once doubted you, would you take revenge or offer forgiveness? Thought balloon. Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. Love letter. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more real, emotional stories are coming your way every week. Red heart. Thank you for watching. And remember, true value isn't in money. It's in how you treat the ones who loved you when you had nothing. Rose.